June 12, 1942. The damp chill of an English summer morning clung to the airfields of southern England, where the mud from recent rains squelched under the boots of Royal Air Force ground crews. At RAF Tangmere near Chichester, squadron leader Reginald "Reggie" Hargrove wiped the fog from his goggles and squinted at the horizon. The Spitfires lined up on the tarmac gleamed under the weak sunlight, their Merlin engines idling with a low, throaty rumble that vibrated through the ground. Reggie, a wiry man in his mid-30s with a scarred cheek from the Battle of Britain, barked orders to his mechanics, his voice cutting through the haze like a bayonet. "Secure those wings, lads. Jerry's scouts could be overhead any minute." The crew hustled, their oil-stained overalls flapping in the breeze that carried the salty tang of the nearby channel. Reggie lit a cigarette, inhaling deeply, the smoke mingling with the acrid scent of aviation fuel. He'd seen too many raids, Stukas diving like falcons, bombs cratering runways, turning fighters into twisted scrap. The Luftwaffe's intelligence was sharp. They always seemed to know where to hit hardest. But today, something different was afoot. Word had trickled down from higher-ups at the Air Ministry, a top-secret project, codenamed Port Cole, meant to turn the tables. Across the field, in a makeshift tent shrouded by camouflage netting, a team of boffins from the Ministry of Supply gathered around a peculiar contraption. Dr. Evelyn Carter, a sharp-eyed physicist in her 40s with ink-stained fingers and a no-nonsense bun, adjusted the valves on a massive rubber bladder. It was the size of a Wellington bomber's fuselage, painted in drab green to mimic the real thing. "Inflate it slowly," she instructed her assistant, young Tommy Wilkins, whose hands trembled slightly from the cold. A hiss escaped as compressed air pumped in, the fabric swelling like a balloon at a fairground. Within minutes, it took shape. Wings, cockpit, even propellers made of lightweight balsa wood. From 50 yards, it looked convincingly like a Hawker Hurricane, ready for takeoff. The ground crew nearby paused their work, staring in disbelief. One mechanic, a burly chap named Bert, let out a guffaw that echoed across the field. "Blimey, what's this then? A bleeding toy for the kiddies?" Laughter rippled through the group, tools clattering to the ground as they gathered. Reggie wandered over, drawn by the commotion, his cigarette dangling from his lip. He circled the inflated dummy, poking at the rubber wing with his boot. It wobbled but held firm. "You lot serious? Luftwaffe pilots would spot this fake from a mile off. Might as well paint targets on 'em ourselves." Evelyn straightened, her cheeks flushing under the scrutiny. She'd poured months into this, sketching designs late into the night by the flicker of a desk lamp, arguing with skeptical engineers over blueprints stained with T-rings. "Laugh all you want, squadron leader," she said coolly, her voice steady despite the jabs. "But this isn't about fooling you lot up close. It's for the Jerrys at 10,000 feet, scanning through binoculars or bomb sights. From up there, with clouds playing tricks and the sun in their eyes, it'll blend right in." Tommy nodded vigorously, wiping sweat from his brow. "We've tested it, sir. Balloons for the barrage, fake oil drums, even dummy vehicles. The whole airfield, poof, inflates in under an hour." Reggie snorted, flicking his cigarette butt into the mud. "And when they drop their eggs, this lot'll pop like a pricked sausage." More chuckles from the crew, Bert slapping his knee. But Evelyn's eyes narrowed. She knew the stakes. Intelligence reports painted a grim picture, the Luftwaffe's Ju-88s and He-111s prowling the skies, targeting real airfields to cripple the RAF's build-up for the inevitable invasion push. If they could draw fire away, even for a night, it might save dozens of planes and lives. "Watch," she said, signaling Tommy. They deflated the dummy in seconds, the air whooshing out like a sigh, folding it into a compact bundle that two men could carry. Word of the rubber runways spread like wildfire through the bases. At Biggin Hill, pilots in the mess hall swapped stories over lukewarm tea and spam sandwiches. Flight Lieutenant Harry Hawk Thompson, a ace with 5 kills notched on his Spitfire, leaned back in his chair, boots propped on a crate. Heard the boffins are blowing up fake fields to trick the Huns. Bloody brilliant or bloody daft. His wingman, a fresh-faced sergeant named Alfie, grinned. Imagine Fritz diving on a bunch of balloons, only to find they've burst on impact. Waste of good bombs. The room erupted in mirth, mugs clinking. But Harry sobered, remembering the raid on Manston the month before, flames licking the hangars, the screams of wounded mates. If these inflatables could lure the raiders astray, he'd take the joke seriously. Back at Tangmere, as dusk fell and the first stars pricked the sky, Reggie oversaw the setup of the first trial. The real Spitfires taxied to dispersal points under the cover of hedgerows, engines coughing to life before fading into silence. In their place, the decoys rose, rows of inflated fighters tethered to stakes, rubber runways unrolling like carpets across the grass. Floodlights, faked with low-watt bulbs behind canvas, cast eerie glows, mimicking activity. The air hummed with the distant drone of a spotter plane, but it was one of theirs, testing the illusion from altitude. Evelyn stood at the edge, clipboard in hand, heart pounding. A chill wind rustled the netting, carrying the faint scent of pine from the woods. Tommy fidgeted beside her. "Think it'll work, Doc?" She glanced up, where the moon hung low, silvering the decoys. "It has to, or we're just giving them more to laugh at." Reggie joined them, his earlier skepticism tempered by the gathering dark. "All right, Carter, show us your magic." As the test plane circled overhead, its pilot radioed down. "From here it looks real enough. Convoy of trucks rolling in. Blimey, those dummies are spot on." But the real test loomed. Days later, on a reconnaissance flight over Pevensey Beach, site of William the Conqueror's landing, now a staging ground for Allied defences, a Luftwaffe Arado R-196 floatplane skimmed the waves. Oberleutnant Karl Becker, peering through his Zeiss binoculars from the observer's seat, spotted what appeared to be a bustling airfield nestled among the dunes. Tents, vehicles, fighters lined up wingtip to wingtip. "Ein Flugfeld, newly built," he reported to the pilot, his voice urgent over the engine's roar. The salty spray misted the canopy as they banked for a closer look. Becker noted the positions, the anti-aircraft positions, perfect for a raid. Unbeknownst to him, it was all air, porthole in action, inflated overnight by teams working in blackout conditions, hearts racing at every rustle in the bushes. Back in Berlin, the report fueled plans for a Wolfpack strike, two Sunderbeans loaded with SC-250 bombs, ready to pummel the threat. Reggie, monitoring from a hidden command post, allowed himself a grim smile. The laughter had faded. Now it was about survival. As the first German bombers lifted off from occupied France, their pilots oblivious to the ruse, the inflatable fields waited like spiders in the web, poised to ensnare the unwary. The war's skies, once a hunting ground for the Luftwaffe, were about to shift. July 20th, 1942. The moonless night over the Sussex coast hung heavy with the scent of salt and seaweed, the kind that seeped into your clothes and lingered like a bad omen. From the dunes near Pevensey, where the inflatable airfield shimmered faintly under starlight, you could hear the distant murmur of the English Channel, waves lapping against the pebbles like impatient fingers. Hidden in a slit trench lined with damp sandbags, squadron leader Reggie Hargrove gripped his binoculars, the cold metal biting into his palms. Beside him, Dr. Evelyn Carter hunched low, her breath fogging the night air as she checked her watch for the third time. The decoys stood sentinel across the false runway, bloated rubber Spitfires tethered like parade balloons, their painted fuselages catching the occasional glint from a shielded torch. Fake gun emplacements, wooden crates draped in canvas, dotted the perimeter, and rows of dummy fuel trucks squatted under netting, their tires mere painted circles on inflated bladders. "Any sign?" Reggie whispered, his voice a gravelly rasp from chain smoking through the weight. Evelyn shook her head, her bun loosening strands that whipped across her face in the gusting wind. Tommy Wilkins, crammed in beside her, fiddled with a portable radio, the static crackling like distant gunfire. The real airfield lay miles inland, its precious Hurricanes and Spitfires tucked away in reinforced dispersals, engines silent to avoid betraying the deception. Port Cole's first live test wasn't a drill. Luftwaffe scouts had buzzed the area at dusk, their shadows flitting like sharks over the water. Now, the trap was set, and the air tasted of anticipation, laced with fear. Petrol fumes from the few real jeeps idling nearby, mixed with the earthy rot of trampled grass. High above the channel, at 15,000 feet, the drone of engines grew from a whisper to a growl. Oberleutnant Hans Vogel, leading a flight of 4 Dornier Du 217s from their base at Abbeville in occupied France, adjusted his oxygen mask, the rubber seal chafing his skin. The cockpit vibrated with the steady thrum of his Jumo engines, carrying the faint metallic tang of heated oil. His navigator, Feldwebel Otto Klein, pored over the reconnaissance photo pinned to his kneeboard, the grainy image showing the new airfield in stark relief. "Target at grid 4723, Herr Oberleutnant," Otto said, his Bavarian accent thick over the intercom. "Looks active. Planes lined up, lights in the hangars. Perfect for a low-level run." Hans nodded, peering through the windscreen where the dark mass of England loomed like a rumpled blanket. He'd flown these missions before, the adrenaline sharpening his focus as flak bursts bloomed in the distance over real targets. Tonight, with fuel rationed tighter than ever, this strike had to count, cripple the RAF's staging for the counter-offensive everyone whispered about in the mess. The formation tightened as they crossed the coast, the lead plane's shadow slipping over the dunes. From the ground, Reggie spotted them first, black silhouettes against the faint glow of the horizon, their navigation lights off, but exhaust trails betraying their path. "Incoming, bearing 240, he hissed into the field phone, alerting the hidden anti-aircraft batteries, real ones camouflaged in the woods. Evelyn's pulse raced. She could feel the vibration in her chest now, the bombers descending like hawks scenting blood. Tommy's hands shook as he logged the time, 01:57 hours. The wind picked up, rustling the decoys slightly, but they held firm, the stakes groaning against the pull. Hans banked left, the Do 217's wings slicing through wisps of cloud that tasted of damp wool on his tongue. "Flak light! Arm bombs," he ordered. The bombardier below acknowledged, the SC-500s, 500 kilos of high explosive each, clunking into readiness. The airfield materialized below, runways aglow with what looked like taxiing lights, fighters queued for takeoff, ground crews scurrying like ants. "It's ripe," Otto murmured, sweat beading under his goggles despite the chill. Hans pushed the stick forward, the altimeter spinning down to 8,000 feet. The wind howled over the canopy, carrying the first puffs of tracer fire from the ground. Defensive guns barking to life, shells whining past. In the slit trench, the world erupted. You felt it before you heard it fully. The earth trembling as the first bombs whistled down, their screams piercing the night like banshees. Reggie shoved Evelyn deeper into the mud, the acrid stench of cordite flooding the air as explosions ripped across the decoys. A rubber hurricane swelled and burst with a sharp pop, flames licking harmlessly at the synthetic skin before guttering out in the damp grass. Dummy trucks shredded, their inflated sides deflating in sad wheezes, scattering balsa debris like confetti. But the real damage? None. The blasts cratered empty fields, uprooting gorse and sending plumes of soil skyward, the shockwaves rattling your teeth. Hans pulled up sharply, the G-forces pressing him into his seat as secondary explosions, carefully placed pyrotechnics, flared below, mimicking ammo dumps igniting. "Direct hits!" Otto whooped, but doubt flickered in Hans's eyes. The fires seemed too contained, the wreckage too sparse. His wingman radioed in. "Fuel low, breaking off." Another stick of bombs from the trailing Dornier plummeted, slamming into the fake runway. The rubber strips tore free, flapping like defeated sails, but the illusion held just long enough. From the air, through the smoke and chaos, it looked like victory. An airfield gutted, the RAF's plans in ruins. Back on the ground, as the bombers receded into the night, their engines fading to a disappointed drone, Reggie emerged from cover, coughing on the dust. Evelyn stood, brushing mud from her coat, a triumphant gleam in her eyes, despite the ringing in her ears. "They bought it," she said, voice barely above the crackle of dying flares. Tommy whooped, pumping his fist. Across the ruined decoy site, crews in blackout gear swarmed silently, deflating the survivors and hauling them away on handcarts, the whole mess collapsible, ready for redeployment by dawn. No planes lost, no pilots scrambling in panic. Just wasted ordnance, a dozen heavy bombs, hours of fuel burned on shadows. Word raced through the chain of command by morning. At RAF Fighter Command headquarters in an underground bunker beneath Uxbridge, Air Vice Marshal Keith Park reviewed the reports over a steaming mug of tea, the earthy aroma cutting through the stale air of concrete and cigarette smoke. "Portcoll's paid off," he told his staff. A map of southern England spread before him, marked with red pins for decoy sites. Reggie, summoned for debrief, stood at attention, his uniform still gritty. "Jerry's think they've hammered us, sir." Our real field stayed dark. Park nodded, his face lined from years of attrition warfare. "Good. Scale it up. Every coastal strip gets one." But the laughter hadn't fully died. In the Luftwaffe's after-action brief at Abbeville, Hans Vogel slammed his fist on the table, the clatter of empty ration tins echoing in the dim ops room. "Something's off," he argued to his squadron leader, the air thick with the smell of unwashed flight suits and ersatz coffee. The explosions, too neat, like hitting stage props. His comrades chuckled uneasily, one pilot ribbing him about English ghosts. Yet reports piled up, scouts confirming the destruction, but follow-up photos showing eerie regeneration, new planes appearing overnight. Fuel logs told the tale, sorties diverted, bombs squandered on phantoms. By week's end, as another formation lifted off, this time Heinkel, 111s laden for a follow-up raid, the decoys had multiplied. Near Folkestone, under a drizzling rain that pattered like machine gun fire on tent canvas, Evelyn oversaw the inflation of a sprawling complex, runways stretching a quarter-mile, hangars of layered rubber, even fake control towers with wired radios crackling static. Reggie patrolled the perimeter, his skepticism long evaporated. "You're turning the sky into our playground, Doc." She smiled faintly, the rain streaking her glasses. "And they're running out of fuel to play in it." The Heinkels came at midnight, their silhouettes blotting the stars, pilots cursing the weather that smeared their windscreens. Bombs rained down, shattering the illusion in bursts of fire and thunder. But again, the heart of the RAF beat untouched. Hans, flying escort in a Bf-109, watched from afar, a knot twisting in his gut. The Allies' laughter, once theirs alone, echoed now in empty bomb bays and grounded reserves. The inflatable fields weren't just tricks, they were thieves, stealing the Luftwaffe's edge one wasted raid at a time. August 15th, 1942. The relentless patter of rain on the canvas roof of the Nissen hut at RAF Kenley drummed like Morse code, each drop a reminder of the sodden summer that had turned southern England's fields into quagmires. Inside, the air hung thick with the mingled odours of damp wool, boiled cabbage from the naffy, and the sharp bite of trichloroethylene from cleaning kits. Flight Lieutenant Harry Hawk Thompson slouched at a scarred wooden table, his flight boots propped on a crate, nursing a mug of tea gone cold. The ace's face, etched with the faint scars of flak shrapnel, bore a weary grin as he listened to the latest scuttlebutt from a cluster of pilots fresh from patrol. Sergeant Alfie Jenkins, his wingman with the freckles and perpetual optimism, jabbed a thumb toward the window, where sheets of water blurred the view of the real Spitfires huddled under their revetments. Word from Tangmere, Hawk. They've got those balloon boys setting up decoys all along the coast now. Jerry's hit one near Dungeness last night, dropped a full load of 500-pounders on what they thought was a squadron of typhoons. Popped like fireworks, and our lads slept through it. The group chuckled, a low rumble that cut through the hiss of a kerosene stove. But Harry set his mug down with a clunk, his eyes narrowing. He'd tangled with Me-109s over Dover just yesterday, the Messerschmitt's cannons stitching the sky like angry hornets, their pilots pushing harder as if desperate for targets. Laugh while you can, Alfie. If Portcoal keeps pulling this off, Fritz'll be scraping the barrel for fuel by Christmas. But what happens when they wise up? Outside, under the downpour that soaked through greatcoats and turned paths to slurry, Dr. Evelyn Carter trudged across the mud-slicked grass, her Wellington boots sucking at each step. Clipboard tucked under her arm, she ducked into a camouflaged lorry where Tommy Wilkins and a team of sappers wrestled with the latest batch of decoys. The vehicle's interior reeked of rubber and glue. The air humid from the gas cylinders lined against the walls like silver sentinels. Right, let's get these hurricanes inflated. We've got a site near Hythe to kit out before dusk, Evelyn directed, her voice crisp over the rumble of the engine idling to power the pumps. Tommy, sleeves rolled up, cranked a valve, and the first bladder swelled with a low whoosh, fabric stretching taut as it mimicked the sleek lines of a fighter. Painted details, roundels, serial numbers scrawled in chalk, emerged from the flatness, the propellers unfurling like paper fans. The team worked in rhythm, the rain hammering the roof like impatient fists. One sapper, a lanky Scot named Mac, grunted as he secured the tethers. These things saved my mate's skin at Pevensey Dock. Bombs hit the fakes, and the real guns never fired a shot. Evelyn nodded, wiping condensation from her glasses, but her mind raced ahead. Reports from the Air Ministry painted a shifting picture. Luftwaffe sorties down 15% in the sector, their reconnaissance flights circling warily, pilots radioing back confusion over vanishing airfields that rebuilt themselves overnight. Portcoal wasn't just decoys, it was a symphony of deception, smoke pots for pyres, recorded engine noises broadcast from hidden speakers, even dummy crews painted on canvas to wave from hangars. A Dudbugun, across the channel, in the dim glow of a flare path at Caen Airfield under German occupation, Oberleutnant Hans Vogel paced the dispersal hut, his flight suit chafing against sweat-damp skin, despite the chill seeping through the cracks. The scent of damp concrete and aviation spirit clung to everything, mingling with the bitter tang of acorn coffee from a battered pot. His squadron's blackboards tallied the frustrations. 3 raids in 2 weeks, each claiming hits on RAF bases, yet photo interpreters in Berlin scratched their heads over images showing craters where runways should be, but no wrecks, no fires lingering. "It's the English weather playing tricks," grumbled Feldwebel Otto Klein, his navigator, polishing his goggles with a rag that smelled of gun oil. But Hans wasn't buying it. Last night's run over Folkestone, he 111s diving through breaks in the clouds, bombs away on what looked like a throbbing hive of activity, had yielded only echoes. The ground had erupted in convincing blasts, secondary fires blooming like signal flares, but dawn patrols reported the site intact, as if the raid never happened. "Fuel allocations are tightening," Hans said, halting to stare at the ops map pinned to the wall, red lines snaking across the Pas de Calais. "Reichsmarshal's furious. Our Ju-88's grounded half the time for want of avgas. If these fields are ghosts, we're bleeding dry chasing them." Otto shrugged, but his eyes betrayed the same unease that rippled through the Luftwaffe's ranks. Pilots whispered of sabotage, of spies inflating lies as easily as rubber. Hans lit a cigarette, the match flaring briefly in the gloom, inhaling the harsh tobacco that burned his throat. Tonight's mission, a Wolfpack strike on suspected build-ups near Eastbourne. 6 Do 217s, escorted by Bf 109s, bombs primed for maximum disruption. He climbed into his cockpit as the rain eased to a drizzle, the Jumo engines coughing to life with a belch of blue smoke that stung his eyes. The formation lifted off, wheels squelching in the mud, climbing into the overcast where the world narrowed to instruments and the throb in your chest. You felt the tension coil as the bombers crossed the coast, the sea below a slate-grey churn under the bellies of the planes. Reggie Hargrove, now coordinating from a forward observation post in the Weald Hills, a foxhole ringed by wet bracken that scratched at your sleeves, peered through his damp binoculars. The decoy site sprawled below, inflated runways glistening like wet tarmac, rows of Spitfire dummies straining against guy wires, fake anti-aircraft batteries with barrels fashioned from drainpipes. Evelyn was there, a shadow among the crews, signaling the activation of the activity, low-watt lamps flickering in patterns, speakers hidden in the gorse blaring the tinny roar of Merlins revving. The air hummed with feigned urgency, the wind carrying the ozone scent of an approaching front. Hunter's lead plane broke through the clouds at 10,000 feet, the altimeter whirring down as the target resolved. A bustling field, trucks rumbling along the perimeter, fighters taxiing under arc lights. "Visual! Engage!" he barked over the radio, the static crackling like breaking bones. The bomb doors yawned open, the whistle of the falling SC-250s slicing the air, their shadows racing across the dunes. From the ground, the impacts hammered home. You saw the first explosion bloom, a rubber hangar shredding in a gout of flame and debris, the shockwave rippling through the earth like a giant's footfall. Dummy planes cartwheeled, bursting with pops that echoed the thunder, pyrotechnics igniting in chains to simulate fuel dumps going up. Cordite smoke billowed, acrid and choking, veiling the site in chaos. But as the last Dornier pulled away, engines straining on throttles pushed to the limit, doubt gnawed deeper. Otto scanned the receding fires through his drift sight. Hits confirmed, but too quick to burn out. Hans banked for home, the fuel gauges dipping perilously, the channel a vast, unforgiving expanse below. Back at the decoy, as the drone faded, Reggie clapped Evelyn on the shoulder, rain dripping from his cap. Another one bites the dust, literally. She surveyed the wreckage, deflated husks steaming in the mud, easily packed away by dawn. No real losses, just another night's haul of wasted ordnance, tons of explosives, irreplaceable fuel siphoned from the Reich's dwindling reserves. By morning, in the Air Ministry's war room, a cavern of maps and waifs tapping teleprinters, the air heavy with cigarette haze and the clack of typewriters, Air Vice Marshal Park poured over the logs. "Portcoals forcing their hand," he murmured to an aide, pinning fresh markers for expanded sites along the Thames estuary. Reggie, debriefing over a hasty breakfast of powdered eggs that tasted of chalk, felt the shift. The Luftwaffe's probes grew frantic, their pilots pushing deeper, risking more for less, but cracks showed. A scout plane lingering too long over a decoy near Ramsgate, its pilot circling suspiciously before peeling off. Evelyn, back at her lab amid blueprints and half-inflated prototypes, wondered how long the illusion could hold before the laughter turned to alarm on both sides. The skies were changing, one popped balloon at a time, but the real storm brewed on the horizon. September 22nd, 1942. The fog rolled in thick off the Thames estuary like a living shroud, blanketing the marshes near Sheerness in a clammy mist that soaked through your greatcoat and chilled the bones. From the elevated watchpost, a rickety tower of sandbags and splintered timber overlooking the decoy site, squadron leader Reggie Hargrove shivered, the wooden platform creaking under his shifting weight. The air carried the briny reek of the river mudflats, mingled with the faint, rubbery tang from the freshly inflated airfield below. Rows of dummy Spitfires bobbed gently on their tethers, their painted surfaces beaded with dew, while fake runways stretched out like pale veins across the sodden grass. Hidden speakers hummed intermittently, broadcasting the low growl of idling engines to stir the illusion of life, the sound muffled by the fog into ghostly echoes. Beside Reggie, Flight Lieutenant Harry Hawk Thompson scanned the murk through a pair of fogged binoculars, his breath clouding the lenses. The ace's jaw was set, a fresh nick from his razor visible under the stubble. His flight jacket zipped tight against the damp that seeped everywhere. "Can't see a bloody thing out there, Reggie. If Jerry's coming, they'll be on us before we know it." Reggie grunted, lighting a woodbine with a hand steady from years of night watches, the match's flare briefly illuminating the worry lines etched deep on his face. Port Cole had notched victories. 3 major raids diverted in the past month, Luftwaffe bombers dumping their loads on shadows, while real squadrons at nearby Manston refueled untouched. But the fog was a double-edged sword. It hid the decoys from prying eyes during setup, yet it could blind the raiders too, or worse, force them lower for a closer look. Down in the assembly area, a cluster of Nissen huts camouflaged with sodden netting, Dr. Evelyn Carter directed her team with clipped efficiency. The interior of the lead hut smelled of wet canvas and hot solder, the hiss of gas lamps casting jittery shadows on walls papered with schematics. Tommy Wilkins, now sporting a grease-streaked forehead from endless tweaks, pumped air into a new prototype, a larger bladder mimicking a Lancaster bomber, its wings spanning 15 feet when fully taut. "Steady on the pressure, Tommy. We don't want it drifting like a lost barrage balloon," Evelyn said, her fingers tracing a seam for weak spots. The fabric whispered as it expanded, roundels blooming under the lamplight. Sapper Mac, the Scot from earlier ops, hammered stakes into the soft earth outside, his mallet thuds lost in the fog's hush. "This one's got flares built in, Doc. Set 'em off on impact. Make it look like the whole wing's gone up." Evelyn nodded, but her mind churned with intercepted signals. Luftwaffe High Command, raging over phantom fields, fuel depots in France running dry, pilots grounded as reserves dwindled to critical lows. Across the channel, at the Luftwaffe base in Cherbourg, the pre-dawn gloom pressed heavy on the concrete aprons, where puddles reflected the harsh glare of sodium lamps. Oberleutnant Hans Vogel, strapped into the cockpit of his Bf 109, the leather seat cold against his back, the cockpit filling with the acrid bite of glycol coolant as ground crews spun the prop. His squadron had been whittled down. 2 pilots lost to RAF interceptors on the last probe, their Me-109 spiraling into the sea like discarded toys. Tonight's escort duty for a dozen Ju-88s felt like a fool's errand. Target a major build-up near the estuary, per fresh recon photos showing swarms of bombers and transports. But Hans knew better. Those images had a staged quality, too uniform, too convenient. Feldwebel Otto Klein, reassigned to ground ops after a sprained ankle, clapped him on the shoulder before takeoff. "Watch for tricks, Hans. The Tommies are playing us like a bad hand of scat." Hans taxied out. The engines snarled, drowning the crew's shouts, lifting into the overcast, where visibility dropped to yards. The altimeter his only guide. The formation droned eastward, the Ju-88's radial engines a thunderous chorus that vibrated through the fog banks. In the lead bomber, Hauptmann Erich Stahl gripped the yoke, sweat trickling under his collar despite the chill, the cockpit alive with the tick of gauges and the navigator's urgent mutterings. Emerging from cloud, target at 2 o'clock low. The estuary materialized in patches. Reed-fringed marshes giving way to what looked like a hive of activity, runways lit by hooded lamps, heavy bombers taxiing amid bursts of steam from ground crews, anti-aircraft searchlights sweeping lazily. Stahl's heart quickened. This was the jackpot, a staging base for the invasion everyone feared. Dive to 5,000, bombs away on my mark. The stick trembled as they descended, the fog parting like curtains to reveal the prize. From the watchpost, you heard them before you saw them, the deepening roar swelling from the west, engines laboring against the murk. Reggie snatched the field phone, his voice a urgent bark. "Scramble alerts, hold fire till they're committed." Below, Evelyn froze mid-instruction, the pump's whine cutting off as she dashed for cover in a nearby ditch, mud splashing her legs. Tommy and Mac scrambled after, hauling the prototype Lancaster to its stake just as the first shadows pierced the fog. Silhouettes of Junkers 88s, their fixed undercarriage like predatory claws. The decoy sight sprang to deceptive life. Speakers blared louder, simulating frantic radio chatter, while hidden winches rolled dummy bomb carts along the rubber runways, their wheels mere illusions on tracks. The raid hit like a hammer blow. Bombs howled down. The first cluster slamming into the fake Lancaster, its bladder rupturing with a thunderous crack, built-in charges igniting in a spectacular fireball that lit the fog orange, debris of balsa and canvas spiraling skyward. You felt the ground heave, shockwaves slamming the watchpost like invisible fists, the air filling with the sharp crack of rupturing rubber and the sulphurous stink of explosives. A row of Spitfire decoys shredded, wings flapping wildly before bursting, pyrotechnics chaining off to mimic fuel tanks erupting in geysers of flame. Tracers from the Ju-88's nose guns stitched the hangars, canvas ripping with satisfying tears, but the real heart of the sight, hidden in the reeds, remained silent, untouched. Stahl pulled up, elation surging as secondary blasts bloomed across the field, the fires reflecting in the estuary's oily waters. Confirmed kills. Pull out! But as his wingman banked, a sharp-eyed observer in the trailing plane radioed doubt. Wreckage too light, looks like dummies. Hans, circling high in his 109, caught the transmission, diving through a gap in the cloud. The scene below twisted his gut, flames guttering on empty marsh, no twisted fuselages, no crews fleeing. Fuel warnings beeped in his cockpit, the gauge flirting with red. "Abort! It's another trap!" he snapped, but too late. The formation scattered, bombs half dropped in panic, engines guzzling precious Avgas on the long haul home. As the drones faded into the fog, Reggie lowered his binoculars, a rare grin cracking his face. By God, they swallowed it whole. Down below, Evelyn emerged, coughing on smoke, her team already at work, deflating survivors with practiced haste, the rubber folding like yesterday's laundry. Tommy whooped, slapping Mac's back. "That's half a squadron's worth of bombs gone to waste." Reports would confirm it. 12 tons of ordnance squandered, fuel for a week's patrols burned on mist and mirages. In Cherbourg, Hans landed with a screech of tires, slamming the canopy open to the reek of scorched rubber from his tires. Stahl stormed the debrief, face ashen. "Ghosts again, our reserves are evaporating." Whispers of defeat rippled through the hangars, pilots eyeing empty drums with grim resolve. Back at Sheerness, as dawn pierced the fog with pale light, Harry clapped Reggie on the back. "Portcoal's bleeding them dry, mate, but they're learning. Next time, they might bring spotters." Evelyn, surveying the scarred decoys, felt the weight of it. The laughter was theirs now, but the Luftwaffe's desperation could turn deadly, pushing raids deeper, riskier. The inflatable fields had bought time, stolen fuel, but the war's tide tugged harder, demanding more than tricks to turn it. October 28th, 1942. The autumn gales howled across the cliffs of Dover like vengeful spirits, whipping the sea into froth that sprayed salt into your eyes and stung like needles. From the concealed observation bunker carved into the chalk face, its walls rough-hewn and echoing with the wind's moan, squadron leader Reggie Hargrove braced against the embrasure, the binoculars' leather strap cutting into his neck. The decoy airfields sprawled below on the narrow plateau, inflated Hawker Typhoons, lashed to iron pegs driven deep into the rocky soil, their rubber skins fluttering like sails in the squall, painted camouflage peeling slightly at the edges from the relentless weather. Fake runways, pieced from layered bladders, snaked toward the cliff's edge, terminating in a sheer drop to the churning waves 300 feet below. Hidden amid the gorse bushes, speakers crackled with simulated radio traffic, voices barking orders in clipped English, while pyrotechnic pots stood ready, their fuses coiled like snakes. Beside Reggie, Dr. Evelyn Carter clutched her oilskin coat, the fabric snapping in the gusts that carried the fishy reek of low tide and the faint, acrid whiff of ozone from an impending storm. Her glasses fogged intermittently, but her gaze remained fixed on the setup, where Tommy Wilkins and Sapper Mac wrestled the last dummy Lancaster into position. The massive bladder strained against its tethers, wings sagging under the wind's assault, but holding just. "Secure that tail fin tighter," Evelyn shouted over the roar, her voice raw from days of coordinating sights up and down the coast. Portcall had expanded into a network of illusions, over a dozen sites now, from Beachy Head to the Wash, each a thief in the night, siphoning the Luftwaffe's strength. Reports from Bletchley whispered of German fuel shortages crippling their operations. Squadrons idled, pilots drilling dry runs while reserves trickled from synthetic plants under Allied bombs. But desperation bred boldness. Intelligence pegged tonight for a major push, a last gasp raid to shatter the RAF's coastal backbone before winter locked the skies. Further along the cliff path, Flight Lieutenant Harry Hawk Thompson huddled in a windbreak of stacked sandbags, his Spitfire grounded for maintenance, but his instincts sharp as ever. The ace fiddled with a thermos of tea, the steam whisking away instantly in the gale, sharing it with Sergeant Alfie Jenkins, whose cheeks glowed red from the cold. "Heard the boffins reckon Jerry's down to scraps. Half their bombers mothballed for lack of juice," Alfie yelled, grinning despite the discomfort. Harry nodded, but his eyes scanned the horizon where thunderheads massed like bruises. "Aye, but cornered wolves bite hardest. If they come, it'll be all in. No turning back mid-run." The real squadron waited inland at Hawkinge, engines cold, pilots dozing in readiness, their hurricanes fueled and armed, but silent to preserve the deception. Across the channel, at the Luftwaffe's forward base in Calais-Marque, the wind clawed at the hangar doors, slamming them with metallic bangs that reverberated through the concrete bays. Oberleutnant Hans Vogel cinched his parachute harness in the pre-flight hut, the air thick with the stench of wet wool from drying flight suits and the greasy smoke from a pot-belly stove fed with scrap wood. His face, gaunt from rationed meals, bore the hollows of a man who'd seen too many empty returns. Tonight's op was do or die, a massed strike of 20 Heinkel He-111s and Ju 88s, escorted by every available Bf-109, targeted at the fortified complex near Dover. Recon photos showing a sprawling base teeming with heavy bombers, fuel bowsers, and anti-aircraft nests. Fuel allotments were skeletal. Each plane carried just enough for the round trip, no reserves, the Junker engines tuned to the brink of failure. Hauptmann Erich Stahl, leading the bombers from his He-111 cockpit, gripped the control column as ground crew swarmed, their torches flickering in the dusk like fireflies. "This ends the ghosts," he muttered to his gunner, the intercom hissing with static. "One solid hit and their invasion crumbles." Hans taxied his 109 into the wind, the prop wash kicking up gravel that pinged off the canopy like hail. The formation assembled in ragged echelons, engines bellowing a defiant chorus as they climbed into the gathering dark, the altimeter needles spinning upward through turbulent air that buffeted the wings like punches. In the lead to 111, Stahl peered through the rain-streaked windscreen, the coastline emerging as a jagged scar under the dying light. "Visual on target. Descend to Angels 5, he ordered, the bomb bay doors grinding open with a hydraulic whine, exposing the stick of SC-1000s, tonners that could crater runways for good. The wind howled through the fuselage, carrying the chill bite of English rain as the bombers plunged, escorts fanning out to shield against interceptors. From the bunker, you sense the assault building, a low rumble swelling from the southwest, vibrating through the chalk like an earthquake's prelude. Reggie slammed the phone to his ear. "Inbound, Vectors 220, heavy formation, hold AA till the drop." Below, Evelyn's team scattered to covered pits, hearts pounding as the speakers amped up the feint, engine revs roaring, klaxons wailing in mock alarm. Tommy triggered the lights, dimmed arcs sweeping the decoys, casting long shadows that danced in the gale. The Typhoon dummies strained, guy wires singing taut, while the Lancaster bladder billowed like a storm cloud. The sky split open. The first He-111 stooped, bombs shrieking earthward in clusters that blotted the stars. Impacts hammered the plateau. You felt the cliff shudder as a 1,000-kilo warhead tore into the fake Lancaster, the bladder exploding in a cataclysmic bloom of flame and shredded fabric, charges detonating in a chain reaction that hurled balsa spars skyward like shrapnel. Rubber runways ruptured with whip cracks, deflating in heaving gasps, while typhoon decoys cartwheeled into the abyss, tumbling end over end to splash into the sea far below. Pyres ignited on cue, smoke pots belching black clouds laced with the chemical tang of burning oil simulants, the blast's thunder rolling out over the waves. Tracers from the escorts raked the emplacements, stitching the ground with sparks, but the real guns, nestled in the cliffs, waited, silent. Stahl whooped over the radio as secondary fires erupted, the decoy site vanishing in an inferno that lit the cliffs orange. "Direct hits! Pull up!" But Hans, weaving through flak bursts that now bloomed from hidden batteries, spotted the anomaly. Wreckage too buoyant, fires too contained, no oily slicks spreading on the water. "It's fakes! Abort!" he yelled. But the formation was committed. Trailing planes dumping their loads in frenzy. Fuel gauges screamed warnings. One Ju-88 faltered, its engine coughing on vapors, limping home as the wind clawed at its controls. The raid broke off raggedly, engines straining against the storm, leaving a trail of exhaust and doubt. As the drones receded, swallowed by the night, Reggie exhaled, the bunker reeking of cordite and sweat. Wasted it all. 20 bombers worth on air. Evelyn climbed from her pit, mud-caked and exhilarated, directing the cleanup, crews hauling deflated husks on ropes, the wind aiding their haste. Tommy laughed hoarsely. Their last fuel dock, burned on balloons. In Calais, Hans touched down amid crosswinds that slewed his tires, the debrief a storm of recriminations. Stahl's face was thunderous. "Phantoms again, our tanks empty for nothing." Reserves hit zero, squadrons grounded, the Luftwaffe's coastal threat gutted. But in the bunker, Harry voiced the unspoken. They'll adapt soon. Portcoles won battles, not the war. Evelyn stared at the smouldering decoys, the gale whipping embers skyward. The laughter echoed faintly now, but the real fight loomed larger, the Inflatable's magic fraying at the edges. November 11th, 1942. The first hard frost of the season crunched underfoot on the frozen turf of the cliffs near Dover, turning the world into a brittle mosaic of white and grey, where the sea's roar seemed muffled, as if the waves themselves held their breath. From the mouth of the observation bunker, its entrance now patched with frost-rimed canvas that flapped lazily in the dying wind, Squadron leader Reggie Hargrove stepped out into the pale dawn light, his breath pluming like smoke signals. The air bit sharp with the tang of ice and salt, carrying faint echoes of the previous night's chaos. The acrid residue of pyrotechnics lingering on the breeze, mingling with the earthy scent of thawing mud from the decoy site's ravaged expanse below. Shredded rubber tatters clung to the rocks like defeated flags, the last remnants of Typhoon and Lancaster dummies scattered by the gale, their painted roundels faded ghosts under a thin hoarfrost. Reggie pulled his scarf tighter, the wool scratchy against his stubbled chin, and lit a cigarette with numb fingers, the flame sputtering before catching. Beside him, Dr. Evelyn Carter emerged, her boots leaving crisp imprints in the frost, her coat dusted with white from the night's vigil. She rubbed her hands together, the cold seeping through her gloves as she surveyed the wreckage, deflated husks already half buried, ready for salvage by the teams that would arrive at first light. Tommy Wilkins and Sapper Mac were down there now, their lanterns bobbing like will-o'-the-wisps, voices muffled as they coiled tethers and folded the survivors into compact bundles. "Another clean sweep," Evelyn said, her voice steady but laced with exhaustion, steam curling from her words. No real damage, and their fuel logs must be screaming by now. You could feel the shift in the air, heavier than the frost, a quiet victory settling over the coast like the morning mist rolling in from the channel. Portugal's network had woven its web tight, decoy sites pulsing with false life from Kent to Cornwall, each one a siren call, drawing the Luftwaffe deeper into the trap. Reports trickled in overnight from the Air Ministry, intercepted signals painting a picture of collapse. Luftwaffe squadrons along the Pas de Calais idled on barren aprons, pilots kicking at empty fuel drums that rang hollow in the French chill. The Dover raid had been the breaking point. 20 bombers committed, their SC-1000s pulverizing illusions, while real RAF wings at Biggin Hill and Tangmere refueled in peace. Pilots like Flight Lieutenant Harry Hawk Thompson already airborne on offensive sweeps, hunting the depleted escorts. Harry himself crested the path from the inland road, his greatcoat slung over one shoulder, Sergeant Alfie Jenkins trailing with a kit bag slung across his back. The ace's face, wind-burned and alive with the thrill of a dawn patrol, split into a grin as he clapped Reggie on the arm. Heard that Jerry's limped home on fumes last night, half their formation ditched in the drink off Boulogne. Your balloon circus did it, Reggie. They're grounded till spring, mark my words. Alfie nodded, his freckles stark against the cold, flushed skin, handing out steaming mugs from a thermos that smelled of strong, sweet tea cutting through the frost. Aye, and our lads bagged 3 109s straggling back, fuel starvation, engines just quit mid-turn. The group huddled close, the warmth of the mugs seeping into palms, laughter bubbling low and genuine now, no longer the skeptical guffaws of summer but hard-won, echoing the title's promise. Across the channel, in the skeletal hangars of Calais Mark, the morning light filtered through cracks in the corrugated iron, casting long shadows over rows of Heinkels and Junkers shrouded in tarps, their props still as gravestones. Oberleutnant Hans Vogel stood amid the gloom, his flight suit unbuttoned at the collar, the stale air heavy with the musty odor of disuse and despair, aviation spirit rationed to drops, mechanics nursing engines on synthetic blends that fouled plugs and coughed smoke. Hauptmann Erich Stahl paced nearby, his boots scuffing the oil-stained concrete, face haggard from a debrief that had stretched into the wee hours. Reichsmarshal's orders. Stand down all coastal ops. Fuel diverted to the eastern front. Our birds stay clipped. Hans nodded grimly, leaning against a wing strut that felt unnaturally cold, the metal unheated by recent runs. He'd circled the Dover fires from afar, watching the deception unravel in his mind. The 2 perfect blasts, the vanishing wreckage, the way the fields regenerated like myths. Ghosts, he muttered, lighting a cigarette that tasted of defeat, the smoke curling toward the rafters. They laughed at us with their toys, and we burned our last drops chasing shadows. Feldwebel Otto Klein, hobbling on his mending ankle, joined them with a sheaf of telegrams, the paper crinkling like dry leaves. Confirmations from Berlin. Sorties down 80% in the west. Recon flights report new airfields popping up overnight. More phantoms, but we can't touch them now. The hangar echoed with the distant clang of a wrench, a mechanic cursing in frustration, but the usual bustle was absent. No ground crews swarming, no engines warming with throaty roars. Hans exhaled slowly, the weight of wasted raids pressing like the frost outside. Months of probes, bombs plummeting into rubber and balsa, fuel siphoned away in futile dives. It had gutted their edge, leaving the skies open for RAF mosquitoes to prowl unchallenged, picking off stragglers and supply runs. The laughter, once the Allies' ridicule, had turned inward. Pilots in the mess traded bitter jokes about English balloons over watery ersatz, morale fraying like old dope on fabric wings. Back on the cliffs, as the sun crested the horizon in a blaze of gold that melted the frost in glistening rivulets, Evelyn oversaw the final pack-up. Tommy hauled a deflated Lancaster bladder over his shoulder, its weight light as a promise kept, while Mac drove stakes for the next site inland, a contingency against any desperate probes. Reggie joined her, stamping out his cigarette in the crunching grass. You turned their scorn into our shield, Doc. Dozens of wolf packs sunk before they formed, years bought for the push across the water. She adjusted her glasses, the lenses clear now in the warming light, a faint smile touching her lips. It was the team's work. Boffins, crews, pilots, but yes, the inflatables held the line. Harry raised his mug in a toast, the tea sloshing warm against the chill. To the ghosts that won the skies. The group drank, the moment stretching as patrols droned overhead. Real Spitfires now unchallenged, carving paths toward occupied Europe. Potkol's illusions had faded with the season, but their legacy lingered. Luftwaffe reserves bled dry. The threat of invasion raids evaporated, the coast secured for the greater storm brewing. In the distance the channel sparkled, no longer a hunting ground but a gateway, the war's tide inexorably turning on wings of rubber and resolve.